Okay, so number one, where it says divide using long division, this you had last week. So that's not new. What's new though is that if you look at number two, let me show you number two. What's new is this right here. So this is no longer linear. So if you go back to all of the problems that you had last week, they look like this. The divisor was linear, x to the first power. Here, it's not going to be linear anymore, but the long division process is still the same. Okay, so let's go ahead and review dividing long division from last week. So first thing you got to remember though is that the numerator, you have to make sure it's in descending order. So x cubed, x squared, x, and then your constant. And the same thing for the denominator. Now when you do this long division, remember it's going to look like this. And so this is your divisor, this is your dividend. Your divisor is the denominator, so that's x plus 2 that goes here. And then your dividend is the numerator. Now remember, if there's any missing term, you need to put a 0. You need that 0 missing term. Okay, and in this case, there aren't any. So I'm just going to write this as x cubed plus 5x squared plus 5x minus 2. And then you do the long division. So you take first x into x cubed. So you're basically saying x cubed divided by x is x squared. And let's go ahead and align it. So I'm going to put the x squareds onto each other. So I'm going to put x squared here, and then you multiply. So x squared times x is x cubed. X squared times 2 is 2x squared. All right, now once you do that, remember the next step is to subtract. And so when I subtract, I'm going to go ahead and write that part here. So this right here really is this. The opposite of x cubed is a negative x cubed, and the opposite of a positive 2x squared is a negative 2x squared. And then basically what you're doing is you're adding these together. So x cubed and a negative x cubed, that's 0. So remember, all this canceled out through each iteration. And then 5x squared and a negative 2x squared is 3x squared. And then you bring down the next term, so plus 5x. And then you do the process all over again, first into first. So 3x squared divided by x gives us, when we reduce this, that's 2x squared. So this becomes 2x squared right here. And if you're doing this correctly, if you multiply, you better get 3x squared right here. So that way when you subtract, you get 0. So 2x squared, I'm sorry, that should be 3, right? So 3x squared. So 3x. So 3x, that's 3x. So 3x times x is 3x squared. So that's what I wanted. 3x times 2 is 6x. And then you subtract. All right, and then when you subtract, let's go ahead and get rid of the parentheses. So when I subtract, the opposite of 3x squared is a negative 3x squared, and the opposite of 6x is a negative 6x. And I'm going to add those up. And so these cancel out. 3x squared negative 3x squared, 0. 5x and a negative 6x is a negative x. And then you bring down the next term. And then you do the process all over again, first into first. So negative x divided by x, so negative x divided by x is a negative 1. So that goes here. So then you multiply. If you're doing this correctly, you better get a negative x right here. And so negative 1 times x is a negative x. Negative 1 times a positive 2 is a negative 2. And then we subtract. And then let's go ahead and get rid of the parentheses. So the opposite of a negative x is a positive x. And the opposite of a negative 2 is a positive 2. And when I add those up, these cancel out. And in fact, negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So the remainder is 0. So that's what we just found. All right, now how do you write the answer? So remember how you write the answer. So the answer, remember, you want to write as the quotient plus the remainder divided by the divisor. So if you go back to that worksheet that y'all did last week, you'll see that that's how you were asked to write the answer. But the remainder is 0. So you could say this is the answer. You could say, well, since the remainder is 0, it's just the quotient. So the quotient is just x squared plus 3x minus 1. Now, if you want to write it like this, then you would say, or you could say the quotient, which is 3x, x squared plus 3x minus 1 plus 0 divided by the divisor, which is x plus 2. So either one of those is fine. All right, but that's what I did last week. So last week, if you go back to all those, there were 4 problems you had to do. If you go back to all those 4 problems, that's the process you did. All right, now, what I want to remind you is this. Let's talk about that remainder for right now, and that's going to help us with number 2. So part 1b. So this is b. So determine if x plus 2, that's right here, is a factor of this polynomial right here. So let's remind ourselves what I mean by that. So listen carefully. We know that 4 is a factor of 8. All right? That's a true statement. We know that's true. And we know that's true because 4 times 2 is 8, right? 4 goes into 8 and 2 goes into 8. So that's why we say 4 is a factor of 8. But in particular, we also know this. If I take 8 and divide it by 4, take 8 divided by 4. So if I do that long division, 4 into 8 is 2. 2 times 4 is 8. I get a remainder of 0. So if you get a remainder of 0, so if the remainder is 0, then this divisor is a factor of the dividend. So if the remainder is 0, the divisor is a factor of the dividend. All right? So it kind of makes sense because 4 goes into 8 2 times and you get a remainder of 0. So 4 is a factor of the numerator. Just kind of like saying this, 15 divided by 3. 3 is a factor of 15. 3 is a factor of 15 because 3 times 5 is 15. 3 goes into 15, 5 goes into 15. Also, if I use long division, 3 into 15, I get 5. 5 times 3 is 15. I get a remainder of 0. That's a remainder. All right, so the remainder 0, then the divisor is a factor of the dividend. So let's go to this question now. Is x plus 2 a factor of this polynomial? Yes, it is, because the remainder is 0. So the answer you're going to say is yes, since the remainder is 0. Okay? All right, so the remainder is not 0. So for example, let's look at this. So let's suppose we had 8 divided by 3. So 3 is not a factor of 8, because 3 times no whole number now, 3 times no whole number is equal to 8. There is none. So there is no whole number. And in particular, you can look at it this way. 3 into 8. 3 goes into 8 2 times. 2 times 3 is 6 with remainder 2. Notice the remainder is not 0. Okay? So the remainder is 0. If the remainder is 0, the divisor is a factor of the dividend. If the remainder is not 0, the divisor is not a factor of the dividend. All right. Okay, so let's look at number 2. Okay, so number 2, we want to divide using long division. Okay, so first of all, remember that when I do this long division, in particular the dividend has to be in descending order, and if there's any missing terms, you have to use 0. Okay, so notice I have x to the 4th, x to the cube, x to the 3rd, x squared, x, and then my constant is missing though. So when I do this, I'm going to have to say x to the 4th plus 7x cubed plus 17x squared plus 20x plus 0. You learned this last week about all those missing zeros. Now for the divisor, the dividend has to have those missing zeros. The divisor does not, but it helps. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and write it as x squared plus 4. Okay, the missing zeros are needed here. You have to have the missing zeros in the dividend. You can put the missing zeros here if you want to. It's not necessary. All right, now let's do the long division. First into first. X to the fourth divided by x squared is x squared. So we're going to line our like terms and put the x squared here. And then you multiply. Just like you did last week, the process is the same. So x squared times x squared is x to the fourth. If you're doing this correctly, the first part here has to be the same. X to the fourth, x to the fourth. X squared times 4 is 4x squared, but make sure you put them under each other. Don't put 4x squared here, you're going to make a mistake. All right, so, but the putting the missing term here kind of helps with not making that mistake, but it's not necessary. X squared times 4 is 4x squared, so that'll be a plus 4x squared. So notice I put that under the x squareds. All right, and now you're going to subtract. You're going to subtract. The opposite of x to the fourth is negative x to the fourth. The opposite of a positive 4x squared is a negative 4x squared. All right, and then you're going to add those. Okay, so x to the fourth and a negative x to the fourth is 0. 7x cubed, there's nothing there with it, so I'm going to bring it down. You can think of that as a 0 if you want to. That's 17, so 17x squared and a negative 4x squared is a negative 13x squared. Okay? I'm sorry, positive 13x squared. Then we're going to bring down the next term, plus 20x. And then you do the process all over again. So x squared into 7x cubed. So 7x cubed divided by x squared. So that'll be 7x. So I'm going to put that 7x above the x column. So positive 7x. And when you multiply, if you're doing this correctly, this better be a 7x cubed that you put here, so that way you can cancel those out. So notice, just like you saw last week, every repetition, the first always cancels out. So 7x times x squared is 7x cubed. 7x times 4 is 28x, but make sure you put that in the right column, so that goes here, the x. So plus 28x. All right, and then you're going to subtract. When I subtract, the opposite of 7x cubed is a negative 7x cubed, and the opposite of a positive 28 is a negative 28x. Now let's go ahead and add these. 7x cubed and a negative 7x cubed is 0. See, they cancel out each time. 20x and a negative 28x is a negative 8x. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about this. Don't forget about this. It's very easy to forget about this. 13x squared minus 28x. All right, and let's bring down the next term, which is 0. Then you do the process all over again. 13x squared divided by x squared is just 13. So that goes here, 13. Then you multiply. 13 times x squared is 13x squared. That's what you wanted, because you want this to be the same as this. 13 times 4, if you need to use your calculator, use your calculator. So 13 times 4 on the calculator is 52. Make sure you put in the right place though. So 52 goes here, okay? And then you're going to subtract. The opposite of 13x squared is a negative 13x squared. The opposite of a positive 52 is a negative 52. All right, and then you're going to add these. If you're doing this correctly, these have to become 0. 13x squared and negative 13x squared, that's 13x squared, excuse me, is 0. Don't forget about this negative 8x, just bring it down. And then 0 and a negative 52, you need to cover this part, you cover that part. 0 and negative 52 is a negative 52. And then remember, you cannot go any further. You stop. You stop when the degree of the remainder. You stop when the degree of the remainder is less than the degree of the divisor. Okay? So the degree of this remainder is 1. See that x to the first? 1. The degree of the divisor is 2. You cannot divide any further, so that's your remainder. That's your remainder. Okay? Whenever you did last week's lesson, the remainder was always a number. That was always a number. Now, you could have a remainder that is an expression, a variable expression. Okay, your answer, just like we did last week, you're going to write as a quotient plus the remainder divided by the divisor. So the quotient is this up here. That's your quotient. So x squared plus 7x plus 13 plus the remainder, that's your remainder, negative 8x minus 52 divided by the divisor, x squared plus 4. And there's your answer. That's all you do. All right, so that's long division. That's long division where the divisor is not linear. Every problem you did last week, the divisor was linear. This time, the divisor is not linear. So you will end up many times where the remainder is a variable expression. So it'll look like this, and the ones last week was a number. But you got to remember this, you don't divide anymore if the degree of the remainder, in one lesson you learned about degrees of polynomials, if the degree of the remainder is less than the degree of the divisor. All right, that's number 2. Number 3. Okay, so let's look at number 3. So there are going to be problems where they're going to ask something like this. Is 2x plus 1 a factor of this? All right, so remember we just talked about. We talked about the fact that the divisor is a factor of the dividend if you get a remainder 0, right? So if I want to determine if this is a factor of this, I need to use long division. I need to use long division and determine the remainder. That's what I need to do. I need to use long division and determine the remainder. All right, so let's go ahead and use long division. So 2x plus 1 divided into, and remember, if there's any missing terms, you have to use 0, and it's got to be in descending order. So x cubed, x squared, x, and your constant. So there are no missing terms, and it is in descending order. So 8x cubed minus 2x squared plus 7x plus 1. All right, so let's go ahead and use long division. Now notice that this is linear, so you could have done this last week. That's not new here. So that's last week. So you take first into first. So 8x cubed divided by 2x. So 8x cubed divided by 2x is 4x squared. So we're going to put 4x squared in the x squared column. If you're doing this correctly, when you multiply, you better get this first term, 8x cubed here. Each time, that's the process that needs to occur. So 4x squared times your divisor. So 4x squared times 2x is 8x cubed. 4x squared times 1 is 4x squared. So notice I'm aligning the like terms. Then you're going to subtract. The opposite of 8x cubed is a negative 8x cubed. The opposite of a positive 4x squared is a negative 4x squared. And then you're going to add, I'll cover this part up, so now you're going to add these. 8x cubed and a negative x cubed is 0. A negative 2x squared and negative 4x squared is a negative 6x squared. And then you bring down the next term. And then you do the process all over again. First into first. Now notice the degree here is 2, so I can go on. See, the degree here is 1. This is a 2, so you can keep on going. Negative 6x squared divided by 2x. Now remember, that's negative. So negative 6 divided by 2 is a negative 3. X squared divided by x is x. So that goes here, negative 3x. And then you multiply. Negative 3x times 2x is a negative 6x squared. Those have to be the same. Negative 3x times 1 is a negative 3x. And then you subtract. When I subtract, the opposite of a negative 6x squared is a positive 6x squared. The opposite of a negative 3x is a positive 3x. And then we're going to add those. Negative 6x squared and 6x squared is 0. 7x and 3x is 10x. And then you bring down the 1. You continue on because the degree here is now 1. The degree here is 1. You stop when the degree is less. So I can continue on. 10x divided by 2x is just 5. So that's going to go here. And then you multiply now. 5 times 2x is 10x. These have to be the same. 5 times 1 is 5. And then we subtract. The opposite of 10x is a negative 10x. And the opposite of 5 is a negative 5. And now we're going to add those. 10x and negative 10x is 0. 1 and a negative 5 is a negative 4. That's your remainder. You cannot divide any further because the degree of a constant, that's one of the things you learned in those lessons last week, the degree of a constant is 0. 0 is less than 1. Okay, so since the remainder is 0, what does that mean? That means that this is not a factor of this. So since the remainder is not 0, 2x plus 1 is not a factor of 8x cubed minus 2x squared plus 7x plus 1. And that's how you answer the question. All right. So on your worksheet and on test 4, you could have problems like this. So to determine if this is a factor of this, you're going to use long division and you're going to look at the remainder. If the remainder is 0, it's a factor. If the remainder is not 0, then it's not a factor. Okay, so that was number 3. All right, let's look at number 4. All right, so number 4, you want to divide using long division. All right, now remember, you had some problems last week where it was written horizontally like this. It sometimes helps if you rewrite it so that way it looks like this right here. So we're going to write this as 4x cubed minus 13x squared plus 2x minus 7 divided by x cubed plus 3x minus 2. All right. Now, let's go ahead and do the long division. Now, notice this is not linear, so that's that new one for us. So let's see what we get. So this time I'm going to go ahead and put the missing zeros in divisor as well. But notice that the numerator, there are no missing zeros. There are no missing terms, rather. X cubed, x squared, x, and the constant. So I'm going to put this here. 4x cubed minus 13x squared plus 2x minus 7. And I'm going to go ahead and put the missing terms here. So there'll be x cubed. See, the x squared is missing, right? So I'm going to put 0x squared plus 3x minus 2. All right. And then we do the long division. First into first. So 4x cubed divided by x cubed is just 4. Right? It's just 4. So notice right away, I don't get any variables here. That's just 4. So I'm going to put the 4 over the constant, just like this. And then you're going to say 4 times the divisor. 4 times 4x cubed is 4x cubed. 4 times 0x squared, 4 times 0 is 0, so I get 0x squared. 4 times 3x is 12x. 4 times 2 is a negative 8. Then we're going to subtract. And then, so the opposite of a negative 4x cubed is a negative 4x cubed. The opposite of 0x squared is still 0x squared. The opposite of 12x is a negative 12x, and the opposite of a negative 8 is a positive 8. And then we add it, and when I add them, see, this is 0 right here. 4x cubed and negative 4x cubed is 0. A negative 13x squared and a 0x squared is a negative 13x squared. 2x and a negative 12x is a negative 10x. Negative 7 and a positive 8 is a positive 1. Now here's a question. Do I continue this process? The answer is no, because look, the degree of this remainder is 2. The degree of the divisor is 3. If the degree of the remainder is less than the degree of the divisor, you're done. That is your remainder. So this is your remainder. You cannot divide any further. So the answer will be the quotient, which is 4, plus the remainder, which is this, negative 13x squared minus 10x plus 1, divided by the divisor. I'm going to write this as a divisor without the 0. So x cubed plus 3x minus 2. All right, so that was number 4. Let's look at number 5. So it's number 5. So again, long division. Now notice this time in number 5, there are some missing terms here. So when I do that long division, I get 3x cubed minus 2x squared. The x is missing, so you must put the x there as 0x, the missing term. You had that last week. And then the constant, which is 5. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put the missing terms for this one as well. So you're going to have the x squared plus 0x minus 1. All right, now let's do the long division. X squared divided into 3x cubed. So 3x cubed divided by x squared is just 3x. So that's going to go here, 3x. Then we multiply. 3x times x squared is 3x cubed. Remember, those have to be the same. 3x times 0x is 0x squared. 3x times a negative 1 is a negative 3x. All right, then we subtract. The opposite of 3x cubed is a negative 3x cubed. The opposite of 0x is still, the opposite of 0x squared is still 0x squared. The opposite of a negative 3x is a positive 3x. And then you add those. When I add those, this is 0. 3x cubed and negative 3x cubed is 0. Negative 2x squared and 0x squared is negative 2x squared. 0x and 3x is 3x. And then you bring down the next term. Now notice the degree here is 2. The degree here is 2. So I can continue dividing. So x squared into this. So negative 2x squared divided by x squared is negative 2. So that goes here. And then we multiply. Negative 2 times x squared is negative 2x squared. If you're doing this correctly, these have to be the same. So that when you subtract, they cancel out. Negative 2 times 0x is 0x, because negative 2 times 0 is 0. Negative 2 times negative 1 is a positive 2. And then we subtract. The opposite of negative 2x squared is 2x squared. The opposite of 0x is still 0x. The opposite of a negative 2, the opposite of a positive 2 is a negative 2. And then we add. Negative 2x squared and 2x squared is 0. 3x and 0x is 3x. 5 and negative 2 is 3. And then notice the degree here is 1. The degree here is 2, so I stop. That is your remainder. And so the answer then will be the quotient, 3x minus 2, plus the remainder, 3x plus 1, 3x plus 3, divided by the divisor, which is x squared minus 1. All right, and then I want you to notice something. Listen carefully about what I'm about to tell you. You remember when you dealt with rational expressions? If you look at this right here, I can reduce this. Now you can leave your answer like this, but I just want you to know that you can reduce this because look at this right here, 3x plus 3 divided by x squared minus 1. So if I factor out the 3, I get 3 times x plus 1. If I factor this, that's the difference of two squares. I get x plus 1, x minus 1. These divide out. So this becomes 3 over x minus 1. So you could also write the answer as well, just go ahead and leave it like that. But just know that some of you may want to reduce this, but I would just leave it like that rather than reducing. Okay, so that was number 5. because you do want your divisor here, and so that's a divisor. So just go ahead and leave it like that without reducing. Okay, number 6, same thing, right, that you did before. Well, let me just make sure that's not the same problem we did. It looks similar to something we just did. No, it's a different problem. Okay, so remember, this is a factor of this if the remainder is 0. All right, so let's use long division. So we're saying 2x plus 3 divided into, and remember last week, this has to be in descending order. Okay, so it's not in descending order, so be careful. 2x cubed plus 7x squared is next, plus 2x, and then plus 9. So make sure it's in descending order. Okay, now we do the long division. 2x cubed divided by 2x. 2 divided by 2 is 1. X cubed divided by x is x squared. So that's going to go here. Then you multiply. X squared times 2x is 2x cubed. X squared times 3 is 3x squared. Then we subtract. When I subtract, the opposite of 2x cubed is a negative 2x cubed. The opposite of 3x squared is a negative 3x squared. And then we add. When you add these, this is 0. That's what you wanted. Now 7x squared and a negative 3x squared is 4x squared. And then you bring on the next term. Now you do the process all over again because the degree here is 2, the degree here is 1, so you can continue this. 4x squared, first divided by first. 4x squared divided by 2x is 2x. 4 divided by 2 is 2. X squared divided by x is x. So that's going to go here. Notice I'm aligning all these like terms. 2x times 2x is 4x squared, so these have to be the same. 2x times 3 is 6x, and then you subtract. The opposite of 4x squared is a negative 4x squared. The opposite of 6x is a negative 6x, and then you add those. 4x squared and negative 4x squared is 0. 2x and a negative 6x is a negative 4x, and then you bring on the next one. I can continue on because the degree here is 1, the degree here is 1, so we can continue with this. So first divided by first. Negative 4x divided by 2x is just a negative 2. So that's going to go here in the constant column. And then we multiply. Negative 2 times 2x is a negative 4x. Negative 2 times 3 is a negative 6. And then you subtract. The opposite of negative 4x is 4x. The opposite of negative 6 is a positive 6. And when I add those, this is 0. That's what you wanted. Notice each time the first columns always cancel out. 9 plus 6 is 15. So notice the remainder. Now I'll stop here because the degree of a constant is 0. 0 is less than 1. So the remainder is 15. So question, is this a factor of this? The answer is no, because the remainder is not 0. Since the remainder, and you got to explain, so you can explain like this, since the remainder is not 0, 2x plus 3 is not a factor of 2x cubed plus 2x plus 7x squared plus 9. And then let's do one more with this. So let's do another one. So is this a factor of this? So let's do the same thing. So we're going to use long division. So using long division, I have 4x plus 1 divided into, and notice that it is in descending order. There are no missing terms. I'm just going to go ahead and write all of this. 4x to the fourth minus 15x cubed minus 28x squared plus 6x plus 3. All right. So first and the first. So 4x to the fourth divided by 4x is just x cubed. So that's going to go in the x cubed column. Then we multiply. X cubed times 4x is 4x to the fourth. X cubed times 1 is just x cubed. Then we subtract. When I subtract, the opposite of 4x to the fourth is a negative 4x to the fourth. The opposite of a positive x cubed is a negative x cubed. And then we're going to add. When I add those, that's 0. A negative 15x cubed and a negative x cubed is a negative 16x cubed. Then you bring on the next term. negative 28x squared. And then you do the process over again because this is 3, this is 1, so I can go further. So now we're going to take first, negative 16x cubed divided by 4x. And that's going to be a negative 4x squared. So that's going to go here, negative 4x squared. So you align your x squareds. Then you multiply. Negative 4x squared times 4x is a negative 16x cubed. These have to be the same. Negative 4x squared times 1 is a negative 4x squared. Then we subtract. The opposite of negative 16x squared is 16x cubed, rather. The opposite of negative 4x squared is a positive 4x squared. Then we're going to add those. This is 0. Negative 16x cubed and a positive 16x cubed is 0. A negative 28x squared and a positive 4x squared is a negative 24x squared. Then you bring on the next term, plus 6x. And then you continue on. Negative 24x squared divided by 4x. Negative 24 divided by 4 is a negative 6. X squared divided by x is just x. So that goes here. So negative 6x. Then you multiply. Negative 6x times 4x is a negative 24x squared. Those have to be the same. Negative 6x times 1 is a negative 6x. And then we subtract. The opposite of negative 24x squared is a positive 24x squared. The opposite of a negative 6x is a positive 6x. And then you add them. These cancel out. Remember, they're canceling out each time. 6x and a positive 6x is 12x. Then you bring on the next term, plus 3. Continue on because this degree here is 1. This degree here is 1. So you can go on. So 12x divided by 4x is 3. So that's going to go here. 3 times 4x is 12x. 3 times 1 is 3. Now we subtract. Now I want you to notice that, see this and this are the same? So when you take this and subtract itself, you're going to get 0. So notice the remainder is 0. So the answer, is this a factor of this? Well, since the remainder is 0, this means that 4x plus 1, the divisor is a factor of the dividend. So 4x plus 1 is a factor of 4x to the 4th minus 15x cubed minus 28x squared plus 6x plus 3. All right. So what we talked about in 37 minutes or 38 minutes is dividing polynomials using long division, but in particular, most of our problems, let me go back and talk about this. So in many of our problems, the divisor was not linear, and also we now know that if the remainder is 0, in this case it's not, but if the remainder is 0, then the divisor is a factor of the dividend. If it's not 0, then it's not a factor. All right, so that is what you will learn in today's lessons that's in Canvas. All right, so that's that part.